Hey, I'm Carlos. I started working construction when I was 15, and I don't remember learning any of this. Today, I'm telling you the how and showing you a few tricks to facilitate your projects and impress your peers. This is a Stanley Fatmax 25 foot. The contractor's choice usually is a Stanley Classic 25 foot or 30, depending on what it is that you do. This is a woodworker source tape measure. This has a little bit more things to it, like a pencil sharpener and a better clip. This one also has a button lock at the bottom of the tape here to hold the tape measure wherever you need. It's a fast action lock instead of using the normal lock that all the tapes usually have. But I always use the index finger method, where you would open your tape and hold it open just with your index finger down here. Just like this. The button's nice, I guess, but it's a gimmick. I do like this tape measure a lot, and this one is a 16 footer, and it's more accurate, or advertised more accurate than your Stanleys. You also have your Milwaukee Garden variety. This one's 25 feet. This one has a lot of bells and whistles. For example, it has numbers on the bottom of the tape and the top of the tape. It has a magnetic tip, and it doesn't provide with the button lock, but it provides this, so you can lock it there and you can still see, because if you lock it the ordinary way, doing it up here, you can't see the measurement, but if you lock it here, you can still see your measurement. It's probably my least favorite, but a lot of contractors like the Milwaukee brand of tape measures. But usually contractor's choice is the Stanley Classic, not the Fatmax. So how do you read a tape measure? On your tape measure, the American one, you have big numbers like the 1, the 2, 3, 4, 5. Those big numbers signify your inches, and this is the way you write inches. So 5 inches would be followed by 2 apostrophes like that. But if you want to write 1 foot, you have a 1F there. But usually if you're writing it for somebody, like you want to say 1 foot 2 inches, you write a 1 there with 1 line, and 2 inches would be like this. And then if it's 1 foot 2 inches and a quarter, you would write it like this for the person. Usually you exclude that, and you would actually just write 14 inches and a quarter. Just depends on who you're working with and what the project would be, but they will you will know the preference right away. Your inches divided, this big one and this big one, would signify your inch. So the largest line in the middle is your 1/2 inch, and then it will have 2 slightly smaller between that. So if you divide this 1/2 by 1/2 again, you get that line that's slightly smaller than the 1/2 inch, like this, and you have one here too. So if you divide 1/2 by 1/2, you get a quarter. That's your 1/4 inch line. And again, if you cut that one in 1/2, you get a smaller line on the tape measure, and that's your 1/8. Your smallest lines on this particular tape measure, so you divide 1/8 in 1/2 again, and now you have a 1/16. This is a zoomed out image of what your tape measure usually looks like. So you got 1/16, 1/8, a quarter, a 1/2, 3/4, 7/8, 15/16, so on and so forth. So if you want to read it quickly, you know that these are 1/16ths of an inch, these are 1/8ths, and these are quarters. So if it's a 1/16th over the 1/2, 8/16ths would be the 1/2, and so you just add 1. That one right there would be 9/16ths. And you can do that for all of them. There are tape measures that will tell you that this is 1/16th, that is 1/8, that is 1/4, that is 3/8. But the tape measure gets really busy. That's why I don't own one like that. Also, you can divide basically infinitely. So if there's a smaller line next to your 16th, that is called a 32nd. Usually in the trades, not a lot of them will need this is an engineer square, and a lot of them are not going to need a 32nd, but this one does have 30 seconds. But if you're doing framing, drywall, the 30-second won't come into play. 30-second, for example, I use this for woodworking. Woodworking, you have to be within a 64th, I would say, or even less than that. A lot of woodworkers stuck in the thou. I don't do that because I'm not that advanced yet. But that's how you read the fractions in an inch. If you ever wonder why the 16th, the 32nd, and the 48 are red, is because when you are framing a house, let's say it's an 8-foot wall, and then you get your 8-foot top. Sometimes you can put studs every 24 inches to the middle, but sometimes you have to put them every 16th. So it is easy for the contractor to just lay the tape measure down and mark the center on every 16 inches. And he doesn't have to do the math in his head, he just has to follow the red numbers. There's a very interesting feature to every tape measure I have ever owned, and it's the fact that it tells you exactly how wide that tape measure is. And here's why. Let's say I'm measuring from wall to wall. Some people will put their tape measure on the wall and then bend it on the other one, and they'll get a rough measurement. In this case, it gives me 26 and maybe a quarter, maybe a half. But if you just push your tape measure all the way to the wall and lock it, then you can look at that and say it's 23 and 5/8. So you just add 23 and 5/8, you add 3 inches. So we give you 26 and 5/8. So sometimes when you have to be very accurate, this is the way you want to do it. If I'm measuring something in woodworking, for example, where I really need accuracy, I will usually grab a ruler or a square with markings, and that will give me a pretty accurate, repeatable line. For example, that would be 4 1/2 from this square, and I can repeat that line very accurately every time. Sometimes in construction, contractors will say burn a line, and what they mean by burn a line is I'm gonna burn 2 inches on this one. But when they say burn an inch, you will actually start measuring from the inch mark over and then subtract that. So I'm gonna start from the 2, I'm gonna measure over, and it tells me it's 6 1/2, but I burned 2 inches, so it's actually 4 1/2. Just because sometimes accuracy this way, it's way different, and then it pushes things, etc., etc. So this is just not gonna give you the most accurate measurement, and sometimes you need that on small, delicate things. In woodworking, I don't even use the tape measure that much unless I'm just rough cutting things and then trimming them down to their actual measurement later. So that's what it means when people tell you to burn a line or burn an inch. So usually on a tape measure, there will be a little bit of play on your tip. But this is normal. I've heard of guys, and I've known guys, where they will actually pinch the metal here harder so that their tip won't move. The reason the tip moves is because it's accounting for the thickness of the tip. So if you're pulling your tape measure here, for example, it will give you 8 7/8 exactly, okay? But if you're not hooking it to anything, you're just going up to an edge, using my square here as an example, it will still give you 7 7/8. So that's why this moves. It's supposed to move. The better the tape measure, the more accurate this will be. Also, in woodworking, you want to be accurate, and your tools want to be accurate too. So I usually, for marking things, even just a quick layout, I will use a pen or mechanical pencil, number 7. And for joinery, I will actually use a knife, and I will mark everything with a knife because it's just infinitely smaller than a construction pencil. This construction pencil, the line itself would be giant, whereas a marking knife line would be pretty tiny, and you can go this is why this is flat, so you can go really accurate with a marking knife. So sometimes the lingo in construction might be a little bit confusing because somebody will measure something and and will mark it, and then they will tell you cut the line or leave the line. This is because they don't even bother to read within the 16ths of an inch, because it just doesn't need to be. If you're framing, you can be off plus or minus an eighth. If you're doing sheetrock, you can be off plus or minus a quarter of an inch. And if it's plus, you just recut it in place with whatever knife you have. And if it's short, then later you're gonna tape it and mud it, and nobody's gonna find out. So it just that's why the lingo, that a guy that's always framing might not ever talk in 16ths of an inch. He might just tell you it's 5 inches, leave the line, or he might tell you it's 5 inches, cut the line. And that's just because it's just short, a 16th or an eighth, and it doesn't matter to him or the project if it's not super accurate. So don't sweat the small stuff if the project doesn't require it. Now, finished carpentry, that's another beast. That's gonna require 16, 30 second. Again, this isn't joinery, but woodworking, for example, these are dovetails. I don't even use a measuring thing. I use reality to cut this out, because reality is going to be the most accurate thing. Here's another thing you should know about the tip. The tip has a little groove in there, and this is so that you can use a nail in this way. I have a screw, but I'm going to use it like a nail. The tape. By the way, contractors sometimes call this the dumb end. Don't do that. That is mean to your helper. And you don't want to insult the guy helping you out at the job site. You want to treat him well. So you can hook that nail or screw to the little groove, and it keeps it really nice and secure, so that you can go as far as you need or want to measure whatever you need to measure. And you just put the nail at a random spot here, but you can put it where you would actually need it to be, no problem. It can be a nail or a screw, as you saw here. Another cool thing about that tip trick is that you can actually mark a circle. Let's say I needed to cut out a circle on this piece of plywood. If you wanted a 10-inch circle, you would lock it at the 5 inches. You would put it there. You would hold your pencil down, and you would just go around your nail like this. But just like that, you can draw a circle, or you can do it the other way, which I find easier. You just hold this here on this side, and you would mark your circle. And your circle can be whatever size you want it to be, and you just lock your tape measure there. This is one of my favorite tricks. Let's say you're at a job site. Let's say you've been working 16 hours and your brain isn't functioning 100%. But you need to measure half of something. You would measure whatever it needs. Here's 32 inches. You would lock it at 32 inches or whatever. Let's make it harder. So let's say 33 and a quarter. So if it's 33 and a quarter, you would bend your tape measure in half and look down on it, and it's 16 5/8. So that's how you get the half of any point. The other thing you can do when you get the half of something is you would measure it, and then you would mark 16, then you would measure it from the other side, and you would mark 16, and if it's off by a little bit, you just go in between the two marks. One of my favorite tricks for a tape measure is when drywall guys cut their drywall with the tape measure and the knife. So let's say they measured whatever crevice, and just imagine this is drywall, So they would lock their tape measure. They would put the tape measure on top of their drywall. They would grab a knife and they would score their drywall like this. And then once they had a score on the drywall, they would break it and then cut the rest of it off. It's a really cool trick. I love that trick. And another trick you can do is if you don't have a pencil or pen with you, you can use your tape measure down and scribe it. So there's my scribe line. Another trick, if you're cutting 2x4s, let's say something like this, and you don't have a square, you would measure it out. Let's say you wanted to cut it at 7 inches square, so you measure 7 inches there, 7 inches here, and then you would use your tape measure as a ruler there, and you would connect those two lines. So using your tape measure as a ruler won't give you the most perfect line, but again, sometimes you don't need a perfect line. You would grab your skills on there and cut it as square as you possibly could.